Welcome into another edition of Sunday Flags. I'm co-host Mason Kinnahan, joined alongside Luke Brown, and it is Cognizant Classic week on the PGA Tour, an event that is kind of sandwiched between a lot of other really big signature events. So it doesn't get a lot of talk. People don't really talk about it a ton, but still a great opportunity for a lot of guys on the PGA Tour to not only get potentially get a PGA Tour win, but also just get a good placement and an opportunity for some guys that we don't usually see on the PGA Tour to kind of be in the spotlight for this week. So, Luke, just first off, how you feeling, on this Tuesday evening and looking ahead here at Cognizant Classic week?
Yeah, certainly, it's not a week that everybody's glued to their television and saying, hey, we got to see what this player does on this hole and this player does on this hole. But, it's obviously going to give somebody their, first, if not very few PGA Tour wins, whoever probably, just guessing that whoever takes this home, it's not going to be, an every week thing for them to win tournaments on the PGA Tour. And, certainly players that have stepped up or that we were looking at the start of the year and saying, all right, this person's going to be primed for a big, breakthrough season. So, obviously interested to see some of those players. It's a very relaxed week in terms of, covering / watching the golf, and, we'll get back to it next week, but certainly got a little bit of golf to play here as well.
Yeah, the Florida Swing this starts the Florida Swing on the PGA Tour this week after the last, about a month in California. But before we get to the Cognizant, we do have some news to go over. We'll start with Tiger Woods, who has been a popular name over the last, week or so. I mean, he is a popular name already, but a lot of talk about Tiger over the last week, with it being, his event over the last weekend in California. So Tiger, according to Doug Ferguson, part of the AP golf team over at the Associated Press, he says that he's reported today that the PGA of America is asking Woods to decide before the Masters whether he wants to take the Ryder Cup captaincy for 2027. Two people informed of the situation describes it more as a soft deadline than an ultimatum. This news is pretty eye-opening. We are still a year and a half away from the 2027 Ryder Cup, but in Ireland or in the United Kingdom, one of those countries over there. I think that's where Adair
Yeah.
I think it's Ireland. But
who's going to tell Mason that Ireland is part of the UK?
Oh, is it not?
You said Ireland or the United Kingdom. Ireland's part of the United Kingdom,
Oh,
unless I'm crazy.
oh no, it is. But I meant like that,
Continue
like
as you were.
Ireland, and then like I was broadening the location where
I don't
it
know if
could
I buy
be.
that. I don't know if I buy that.
That's what I was doing. That's what I was doing there. But yeah, I don't know. Look, initial thoughts, I guess. The soft deadline for Tiger for deciding on whether he wants to be the Ryder Cup captain. If I had to guess, I don't think he decides before the Masters. But what are your thoughts after hearing about this today?
I don't know. I mean, it seems pretty. We're sitting here on February 24th, and obviously this episode will come out on the 25th. That is not a whole lot of time before we get rolling on the Masters. I mean, the Masters is a little over a month away. Like, that's not a ton of time to figure out whether you want to do something that's a good ways away. As I said last week or on Sunday, I think it was on Sunday night, that we are much closer to the most recent Ryder Cup than we are to the next one. And, there's been talk. Last week we were talking about John Rahm, and is he going to be able to play because of the, kind of complications that he has with the DP World Tour and the fines. So talks are already kind of ramping up for this next Ryder Cup in terms of specifics and logistics. I agree with you. I don't think that Tiger Woods is going to make a decision by the time that we get to Augusta, because it's a tight turnaround and it's a big decision to make. That being said, I think the United States needs somebody that has the credentials of Tiger Woods, who has the most credentials of anybody in the sport of golf, um, to lead the team going forward. You're coming off of an all-around embarrassing Ryder Cup They obviously made it interesting on Sunday. It was super fun to watch. But, as we've said maybe 2 weeks ago or something, I don't remember when I said it, but, the Ryder Cup, there's been a lot of narratives around it. Initially, it was, oh my gosh, the Americans are getting absolutely killed out there. To then on Sunday, the Americans are making this thing interesting. And then right after they lost, the narrative shifted right away to the fans were out of control. And I don't disagree. I think that that there is that aspect of things where Rory McIlroy was getting into it with fans and things of that nature. And, but overall, it was not a good look for the Americans. And so they have to turn the page. In my opinion, they need a win. And Tiger Woods is a guy that can earn the immediate respect of everybody. And not saying that Keegan Bradley didn't, but people are going to watch and listen to what Tiger Woods has to say and do. So
Yeah.
I'm all for him being the Ryder Cup captain of the United States, but I don't think that the PGA of America is going to get what they want. I think that the ball's kind of in his court, though, considering who he is. I don't think the PGA of America can, walk up to Tiger Woods in the clubhouse of Augusta. Depends on what clubhouse he's using. The, you know, visitors clubhouse or the players clubhouse. Well, we'll see. But I don't think they can go up to him, on the range and say, time's up. They can't. I mean, we're talking about the greatest person to ever do this. The ball's in his court. I think that he can decide as late as July, August of this year. And they would say, okay.
Yeah, you can't push around Tiger Woods. And no matter what this soft deadline is, which to me is kind of a joke based on, what the prestige of Tiger Woods versus how, the PGA of America and has kind of gone about the Ryder Cup over the last, couple of tournaments. You can't really give him a deadline. I feel like you're kind of on Tiger's time in terms of when he's going to decide this. And I also find it interesting that, Keegan Bradley was named Ryder Cup captain on July 8th, 2024. So that'd be the equivalent of this upcoming July for the 2027 Ryder Cup. So I guess if you want to go with a big name like Tiger, naming him earlier rather than later is a good thing. And I also just think in general, if Tiger does accept being the Ryder Cup captain, the PGA of America sees that like, I wouldn't say as equivalent to winning a Ryder Cup overall, but the amount of popularity that he brings and the amount of praise that it would bring the PGA of America for pulling this off, it's kind of a win on its own, just him being the captain. So to me, the politics of it is going to be really interesting to see how it plays out, and we'll have to wait and see. If it's not Tiger, to me, my top choice would be Brandt Snedeker. He's been my top choice for quite some time. He was an assistant captain last year at the Ryder Cup. He's the captain of this year's President's Cup team. If he can pull off a pretty dominant win against the international team this year at Medina, I think he's definitely going to be the front runner to be the Ryder Cup captain if they haven't named one to that point. But it's going to be interesting because I think there's a lot of options. If you don't go Tiger, and if you don't get Tiger, there's a lot of different ways you could go. And it's kind of right now it's Tiger number one, a big gap than everybody else. And I don't know if how well Tiger's going to do as a captain, right? But you have to try just because of how well thought of he is, in the golf world, and just all the success that he's had. He's got to be the number one option. So definitely an interesting situation. Speaking of Tiger, he's recovering. You mentioned it, you touched on it a little bit, recovering from his injury, his past multiple injuries and surgeries actually. And he has left the door open for potentially getting to the Masters and playing at Augusta. But I think there's something more important that we're forgetting here, Luke, and that is Jupiter Links plays next week. Jupiter Links plays next week.
How did I know that we were going to the SoFi? Yeah.
And if Tiger Woods is open to playing in the Masters a month and a half from now, he's got to be open to playing the TGL now, because that's just how it is.
I agree and disagree. I think that you can't push yourself here. He's in a I don't want to say fragile spot, but there's no way. And really, the walking has always been the biggest challenge in these last 6 years. Whatever, however many years now that it's been, the walking has been the biggest challenge. It's not the golf, and he's been very upfront about that, and that's why I think there's been so much allure to the Champions Tour surrounding his, because you can use a driving
Art.
cart.
Yeah.
So maybe because you don't have to walk, you don't have to trek, and traipse up and down a golf course playing in the SoFi Center or whatever they call that
SoFi Dome.
building,
SoFi Dome.
SoFi Dome. Um, but again, it's like, do you want to push yourself? Do you want to risk, a back injury or this or that before you go out and try to compete for a green jacket? We'll see how that goes, and it's the most prestigious tournament in golf, and he's always had the attitude. I mean, obviously there's that viral interview clip that if he's going to go play a golf tournament, he wants to win. So right now, if I'm Tiger Woods, I'm not putting myself in that scenario where I could potentially strain myself. I would be open to, I know what you're saying. If you're open to doing this, then why aren't you open to doing that? But there's just no way that I'm putting that kind of pressure on myself before potentially going out and playing at Augusta.
Yeah, well, we'll see. Jupiter Links has two matches in the next week, Sunday and next Tuesday. So a lot on the line as Jupiter Links looks to push, have that playoff push towards the final week of the regular season. But I kind of do agree with you in some ways in terms of if he gets hurt playing TGL before the Masters, and like that's how it's going to end, and that's how like that this Masters run or potential Masters run is going to end, then that's not a good look for him, and that's not a good look for TGL as well, which is a league that he kind of has founded. So even though it'd be great ratings wise for the league to go out there and play, there's a lot of cons to it too. So I understand both sides here, and I think it'll be interesting to see if he does go and tee it up at TGL. If it's, I doubt it's both days, or I doubt he does it more than once. Really, at this point, as he leads up to the Masters, I will say on the Champions Tour, you mentioned it a little bit. I think he's going to play on the Champions Tour. I'm pretty convinced at this point that he is at some point. I don't think it's going to be
And like
before the Masters.
U.S. Senior Open,
Mm-hmm.
like the U.S. Senior Open has some real street cred. Like Patrick Harrington won last year. Um, I sway back and forth. I mainly sway towards making the minimum age higher for the Champions Tour, because like Phil Mickelson, who played at Oakmont last year, is older than Patrick Harrington, who won the U.S. Senior Open. Like, I think things get a little, wishy-washy there. But then again, like there's a little bit of an allure because you have guys like Harrington who are out there and that provide a little bit of credibility to the senior side of things in the golf landscape. So, it's a little less charity case type of situation and a little bit more competitive for somebody like him to go out there. But then again, it was such a slow and uncertain, I don't want to say death because he's very much still with us,
Mm-hmm.
but death to the career for him. Like it was such a slow and uncertain process. You didn't know when or if he was coming back. He's obviously had accidents, and there's a lot to unpack to the story of Tiger Woods, but um, yeah, there's it's very interesting to me that like what he's willing to do, I guess, and if he's willing to kind of take a step back and say, yeah, Champions Tour is going to be more my speed, but he's still interested in playing in the Masters. And like really, there was never a send off for Tiger Woods, and he's the greatest player in the history of the game. Like there was never a farewell tour with him, so it's always kind of been, waiting and waiting and waiting on the comeback until eventually you're out of years to wait.
Yeah, it's definitely. I mean, you look at it's been 7 years now since he won in 2019 at
Right.
Augusta, and really since then it's been injury after injury, accident after accident, and I mean we're here in 2026, 7 years later, and maybe there's some light at the end of the tunnel for him in terms of now it seems once he's hopefully, once he's healthy again, he can start playing regularly. But you never really know with the amount of kind of surprise surgeries that he's gotten in the last few years as well. It wouldn't be shocking if something else came up for him as well. So definitely stuff to monitor. The U.S. Senior Open, by the way, first week in July. So still, quite some time before that, and he can definitely, if he does end up playing the Masters and hops on the Champions Tour midway through the season, you can definitely get into the Senior Open and have some practice before that. So that window is definitely open for Tiger. All right, let's move on now to the Cognizant Classic, which is this week on the PGA Tour. Going to be hosted at PGA National, par 71, 7,200 yard course. The field this week, Luke, is one of the fields of all time. We've got 0 top 25 players in terms of the OWGR, 8 top 50 players. Notable names include Shane Lowry, Aaron Rai, the Højgaard twins, Johnny Kiefer, Michael Thorbjornsen, Hao Tong Lee. We were supposed to get Jacob Bridgman, who was won last week, and Ben Griffin, but both of those guys withdrew. Bridgman makes sense for him, even though I found this weird that Bridgman is already in all the signature events, and if he plays this week, then he would have played a 5th week in a row, have the Arnold Palmer next week, and then the Players the week after that. So then he'd play 7 events in a row. And it didn't matter. Like so sometimes you see, players win for the first time on tour, and it gets them into all of these signature events or these other events. So it kind of reshapes their schedule. So then you see them maybe drop out of a lower tier tournament the next week. But for Bridgman, he was already in because he made it to Eastlake last year. So he was already in, and he still was in this field among most likely the next 2 weeks fields as well. So definitely kind of odd.
I really don't.
Yeah.
I really don't remember him being at Eastlake, which is odd because I was at the final round of the BMW. So I definitely, I definitely at the time knew that he was top 30, but that is interesting. I don't remember. I don't have any recollection of him making it all the way to the Tour Championship last year. So yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, and maybe he didn't expect to play as well as he did last week. So, he thought that he could use all of the points and things of that nature. Now um, he can kind of budget a little bit better where he wants to play and where he wants to make his money and earn his points and things like that. So that would be probably my best explanation. That tied in with won a tournament last week. Don't really know if you need to play the next week, especially in a tournament that is not as prestigious, doesn't have as good of a field. So I would say those two combined is probably why he dropped out this week.
Yeah, looking at kind of the results, it was a T17 at the FedEx St. Jude and then a T19 at BMW. If I remember correctly, I know Akshay, I believe, was the last guy who got in. I think Bridgman was the second to last guy who got in, or something like that. So it was just barely, and he finished T27 at the Tour Championship. So he wasn't kind of.
So he was probably like in that fight, like Michael Kim was really scratching and clawing to get in. Yeah, there was a bunch of it was a lot of fun. I've never been to a FedEx. Well, that's not true actually. I've never been to the final round of a FedEx Cup playoff tournament before. That was really fun on 18. It's like, okay, Batia needs to like par this hole or else he's not playing next week and he's not making it, another round in the playoffs. And, same thing with Michael Kim. And, that was a lot of fun. So, yeah, it was so tight. And I mean, it always is. So,
Yeah.
in terms of this week, I'm looking now at kind of the list for Palm Beach Gardens. And this is obviously the course that hosts the Cognizant every year since it started, which was the Honda Classic when it started back in 07. It's also this is a major course back in '87, hosted the PGA Championship as well as 4 years prior hosted the Ryder Cup. So they're not playing on, you know, they're not playing on your local municipality course.
Mhm. Yeah, it's definitely going to be an interesting course to watch this week, and let's get to our board because we've got some names to talk about here this week. So if you're new here, Luke and I each pick 4 golfers every week. One in the top 50 ranked in OWGR, one not in the top 50 of OWGR, a past champion of that event for the week, and then a classic one and done pick, which I actually have the list of all of our one and done so far. So I'll go over that once we get to that category. But Luke, we'll start with the top 50 category. Oh, by the way, we add up all this money each week and we get to a total. And Luke, you're down pretty big still, about $2 million. I'm at 4.7. Luke, you're at 2.9 million through this season so far. So some work to do. And who are you starting off this week with knowing you got some work to do?
Yeah, in my top 50 category, I have Rasmus Højgaard, who has not missed a cut so far this season. He started at the Amex and was T44, 15 under that week. He went to the Farmers the week after, was T30, and then went to Phoenix and Scottsdale, went T24 at 8 under for both of those tournaments. So he's had a little time off now. He has not been on the PGA Tour since TPC Scottsdale on the 5th. It's now going to be the 26th when they get this golf tournament going. That's 3 weeks off. And, he comes back out and knows that he needs to, you know, bring it up a little bit. And Mason, you have somebody that looks a lot like him.
Yeah, I have Nikolai Højgaard. So the other Højgaard twin, we're both really high on a lot of these. Oh my goodness, I'm blanking. It's not. Is it Norway? Right? Is it Norway?
Yeah, Norwegian.
Okay.
Yeah.
A lot of these Norwegian golfers we're really high on, and
I'm sorry, Denmark. Denmark.
Denmark. Okay, Denmark. Yeah, I had the flag, couldn't think of the country. I know the
Yeah.
flag. It was red.
Yeah, it's got that that medical symbol on it, doesn't it? Yeah,
Yeah.
right.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. But I went with Nikolai here. He T3 at Phoenix, which was the last event he played in, so he hasn't played for a few weeks. He also had a T4 at the Dubai Desert Classic. So a couple of really solid finishes to kick off his 2026 season, and I'm just pretty confident in. I feel one of these twins at least is gonna be on the leaderboard deep into the weekend, because in a field like this, these two guys are some of the most talented and most athletic, you could say, as well, in terms of how fast they can hit the golf ball and how far they can hit it. So I like both of these guys here. I think it's kind of a toss up between them of which one to choose. So I went with Nikolai. You went with Rasmus, but you went with another Denmark golfer in your not top 50 category. So tell us a little bit about Rasmus Nørgaard Peterson, another guy that you and I both love.
Yeah, we got both the Højgaards and we got both the Rasmuses all in a little L shape there. Yeah, Rasmus Nørgaard Peterson is one of the golfers that we highlighted at the start of the year. Seems very Scotty-esque in his even-keeled behavior. Kind of goes into everything, approaches it the same, doesn't get too high or too low, which is what we said back in late December, early January about him. Got a chance to see him at the U.S. Open back in June. I really like his game, and did not necessarily have like the on fire start that we were expecting. Like we knew somebody was going to catch fire. I feel at the start of the year, it ended up being Goddard, who has collected 2 wins on tour this year. Looking for that spark at a Nørgaard Peterson, and in an event like this, I think that this is kind of what can make it happen.
Yeah, you look at the last year and a half for him or so. In August of 2024, he was ranked 176th in OWGR and 271st in data golf. About a year and a half later, he is 60th in data golf and 58th in OWGR. So the metrics really like him, and he's had a pretty significant growth over the last couple of years. Now, he's only a one-time winner on the DP World Tour, and he's kind of still looking for that breakthrough tournament. This one could potentially be it. His wedge play, I think, needs to improve from his first couple events on the PGA Tour. He lost strokes around the green in both of them, at the Farmers Insurance, which was a T49, and at Phoenix, which was a T41. But if he gets that iron and the wedge play going, the putter's going to be there, I feel like, and you never know what's going to happen in an event like this. I think he can be someone that, if he picks up a big win here, this gets him into a lot of the majors. He's currently in the Masters. He's on pace to qualify for the PGA Championship and the U.S. Open. He's qualified for the Open. You're going to see him a lot. One of the best golfers that consistently plays on the DP World Tour. So I really like him as well. I went with a younger guy as well. Luke Clanton is someone that I think he was on my breakout list as well before this season, and maybe it's just the Golf Channel games that are getting to me from back in December. But Luke Clanton was a lot of fun to watch, and I know we're used to kind of giving up on some of these guys pretty early, a lot of hype around Nick Dunlap, and it kind of fell off, and it's still not really back to what it once was for him. But I believe a lot in Luke Clanton, and I think he can, have a really solid performance in a field that is, again, not the strongest. It's been a rough first three events in the PGA Tour, in his PGA Tour season so far. Withdrew at the Sony, Amex, and Farmers, and he hasn't played because he's not qualified for the signature events. Not qualified for any of the majors as well. So some work to do, and I feel like this guy's going to be motivated to, put in some good a good performance over this week, and potentially go on a run late in the weekend. So I went with Luke Clanton for my not top 50 pick. Past champion, we had four options in this field for this week: Keith Mitchell, Austin Eckroat, Joe Highsmith, and Chris Kirk. You decided to go with Chris Kirk, Luke. What stood out to you about him?
I guess it's now or never for Kirk in a very limited field here of players that we could take. Kirk has had a really poor start to the year. He was cut in Hawaii, he was cut at the Amex, and he was cut in the Waste Management. So, that is not good golf. And then placed T52 at Pebble Beach. So it's obviously making a cut is something that is a sign of improvement from getting cut 3 times to start the year. He's had 2 weeks off, so it's now or never. There wasn't a whole lot of option here in this category. Probably this might be our least appealing past champion selection that we're going to have all year, and we'll see if Chris Kirk can I just make the cut, make a little bit of money in this category, and we'll see what happens. Other than Kirk, I like the guys on my board.
Yeah, I went with Keith Mitchell in this category, and I'm kind of in the same boat as you. Both Mitchell and Kirk historically have been really good to start off tournaments, especially in weaker fields like this. So you often kind of see them up in the leaderboard early on, and their play kind of gets worse as the weekend approaches. But both Mitchell and Kirk are solid options. I still can't believe. You remember Chris Kirk won the Century in 2024. I still can't believe that happened, which is pretty crazy. But we'll see with these guys. Definitely a pretty weak category to choose from. I was surprised we had 4 options, though, to be honest. I was worried that we weren't going to have 2.
Like 2, yeah.
Yeah, so, again, 4 options, that was good. All right, our classic one and done now. Before we reveal our picks, there's kind of an update on where things stand. I'll start with my one and done picks so far. Sony Open, I went with Kurt Kitayama. Amex, Ben Griffin. Farmers, Patrick Cantlay. Phoenix Open, Siwoo Kim. Pebble Beach, JJ Spawn. Genesis, Akshay. Cognizant Classic now. I went with Sam Ryder. Ryder, to me, he has good course history at PGA National, which is kind of the thing that stood out to me the most on Data Golf. I think he was he was the 6th or 7th guy, I think, that had the best strokes gained per round or something at PGA National. So that's what stood out to me about him. Plus, he's had over, I think, 20 rounds as well, which is, when you're looking for course history, that's a pretty good number to look for compared to some of these other guys that have only played at this tour or this course, once or twice. So that's also what stood out to me. Now, for you, Luke, so far you went with Denny McCarthy at the Sony Open, Tony Finau at the Amex, Ludwig at the Farmers, Jordan Spieth at the Waste Management, Wyndham Clark at Pebble Beach, Hideki Matsuyama at Genesis, and here at the Cognizant, you went with.
Yeah, technically is a rookie on the PGA Tour. Um, he's obviously had various spurts of success, particularly at the Open Championship. He's played really, really well, including his finish at the Open last year. I don't see myself picking him in a much more loaded field than this. He's played some good golf. He's a fun personality. We've talked about him before. He's much older for the typical first year player on tour. So we'll see how this goes.
Yeah, Hao Tong Lee was also at the Golf Channel games as well. Just putting that out there back in December. So he was a
Always
very
gotta
fun
remember that.
personality. Yes, very very fun personality to kick off his 2026. A couple of good placements: a T8 at the Amex and a T11 at the Farmers. Most recent tournament was the Waste Management where he was cut, but already stacking together some really solid performances on his first full year on the PGA Tour. But Luke, I think that's going to wrap up our Cognizant Classic preview. Any final thoughts before we close this thing off?
I don't think so. Other than that, you can follow along with us on social media on X and Instagram, as well as our website, through the links of the description in this episode. And we look forward to seeing you on Sunday to get you a recap of what we saw here in Florida. The California and West Coast swing is over. That always means that we're getting a little bit closer into the spring and certainly getting closer to Augusta. So we'll see you Sunday, and thanks for tuning in.
Yeah, it's going to be a fun week ahead. And, we got the Arnold Palmer the week after that and the Players the week after that. So some pretty big tournaments ahead here on the PGA Tour. But for Luke Brown, I've been your co-host, Mason Kinnahan, and we'll see you on Sunday.